Hey there folks, tonight we're diving deep into the world of finance, specifically the Dodd Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. Don't worry, I promise to make it as painless as possible. Enacted in 2010, Dodd Frank was America's response to the 2008 financial crisis. Remember that mess? Yeah, good times. The goal? Prevent another meltdown, obviously. The act aimed to rein in risky Wall Street behavior, protect consumers from predatory lending, and increase transparency in the financial system. It was a massive piece of legislation, over 800 pages long, and it touched nearly every corner of the financial industry. Now you might be thinking, John, this all sounds incredibly boring. And you'd be right. But it's also incredibly important because what happens on Wall Street doesn't stay on Wall Street, it affects all of us. So buckle up, because we're going on a wild ride through the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Dodd Frank Act. One of the main goals of Dodd Frank was to make the financial system safer. Did it work? Well, the answer, as with most things in life, is complicated. On the one hand, the Act introduced several measures designed to prevent another crisis. These included stricter capital requirements for banks, increased oversight of financial institutions, and the creation of the Financial Stability Oversight Council to monitor systemic risk. These reforms were designed to make banks less likely to fail and to prevent the kind of domino effect we saw in 2008. And there's some evidence they've had a positive impact. The financial system is arguably more stable now than it was before the crisis. However, critics argue that these measures have also made it harder for smaller banks to compete, potentially leading to less lending and slower economic growth. It's a classic case of you break it, you buy it, except in this case, it's more like we almost broke it, so now we have to fix it. But the fix might break something else. Now, let's talk about the part of Dodd-Frank that actually affects you directly: consumer protection. Remember those predatory mortgages that helped trigger the financial crisis? Yeah, Dodd-Frank aimed to prevent those from happening again. It created a new agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB for short. Think of the CFPB as a watchdog for consumers in the financial marketplace. They're responsible for making sure that banks and other financial institutions are playing by the rules. This includes things like preventing discriminatory lending practices, cracking down on payday lenders, and making sure that credit card companies aren't sticking you with hidden fees.
The CFPB has been pretty active since its inception, returning billions of dollars to consumers who were wronged by financial institutions. But it's also been a target of criticism, with some arguing that it's too powerful and overreaching.
While Dodd-Frank was intended to make the financial system safer, it's had some unintended consequences, particularly for smaller banks. The Act's increased regulatory burden has disproportionately impacted community banks and credit unions.
These smaller institutions often lack the resources to comply with the complex rules and regulations imposed by Dodd-Frank. This has led to concerns about a decline in community banking, which could have negative implications for small businesses and local economies. Community banks play a vital role in providing credit to small businesses, and their decline could stifle economic growth. Additionally, the increased compliance costs associated with Dodd-Frank have made it more difficult for smaller banks to compete with larger institutions. This has contributed to a wave of consolidation in the banking industry, with smaller banks being acquired by larger ones.